Okay, so this week what we're going to look at are minerals. And so we've kind of gotten through some of the basic background stuff that I think is necessary for to understand the rest of the content. So we know something about the interior of the Earth, we know something about plate tectonics and time. These are all important components when we talk about the rocks and how they interact and how we interact with all those things. So we're going to start small and then build our way up to these rocks. And what builds rocks are minerals. And of course, what builds minerals are atoms and elements. And so in this module, we're going to focus certainly on the minerals, but there'll be a little bit about, what makes a mineral. So we'll talk a little bit about atoms and elements. And you've had a taste for this in the previous module. We talked about geologic time, and we talked about absolute age dating. We had to invoke some chemistry where we talked about what an isotope is. We talked a little bit about, here's an atom. It's got a nucleus with protons and neutrons and a little electrons floating around, and those things can vary. And that's what makes isotopes. So we're going to just refresh your memory about that a little bit in the first part of this minerals lecture. And then we'll talk about, what is a mineral. So certainly knowing the definition and then how to ID them. And usually those, how do you ID minerals is through a sequence of tests. Sometimes as you look at the pictures that I've kind of got here, color can be helpful. Purple, but of course, purple. I don't know if that's purple, but purple. Maybe it's not the best, but certainly it can eliminate some. And sometimes color is very diagnostic, but oftentimes there's multiple colors. So we have to use other tests. And so we'll introduce those other tests in the lecture. And so you would go through that sequence and figure out, and of course, you wouldn't be expected to memorize all the properties of all the minerals. And the good news is, even though there's thousands of minerals, there's probably only a handful, maybe, 30, and for us, maybe even 10 minerals that are super common. And those are the ones we want to focus on, of course. But in order to identify them, you would have a chart, right? And you would say, oh, this passed this test. So it eliminates all these. It can only be these 5. Well, let me do another test. And we're like, oh, this test eliminates those 3. Oh, it's either this or this. And do one final test. And voila, you know what it is. And so that's the idea of how you would identify minerals. And so that's what mainly we're going to go through in the minerals lecture is just these properties. What are they? How do they work? And that kind of stuff. And like I said, a little bit about the building blocks of minerals. And so once you've gone through where is it? Here's the PowerPoint, of course. And then here is a video that walks through the PowerPoint. So you can go through either of those. And then you can go ahead and take the lecture quiz for that. And so like in the previous videos, the rest of the content will also either supplement that main material or add a little additional information. And so there is an article here that kind of just describes what is a mineral. So it's a little bit of a supplement here, kind of emphasizing some of the most important parts. So you'll take or read this article, and then you can take the article quiz. You're going to do another Earth Revealed series, another overview here that talks about the minerals of the Earth. And new this week, what I've decided to do is for the video, there's no time limit for the quiz. And so, that way you can just you can watch the video. If you have the ability, you can have the quiz open. And as you listen, you're like, oh yeah, okay, here's the answer and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping a lot of times the videos are longer. This one's not too bad, but to remember everything you took in, watched can be challenging if you have a short time limit for the video. So no time limit for the video quiz. You will have the time limit, right, for the main lecture and the article, but for the video quiz, there's no time limit. So you can just kind of go through the video, hopefully at your leisure, and maybe you'll have more ability to absorb some of that information. And then finally, for the homework, basically, I'm going to force you to look at some properties of minerals. And how am I going to do that? Well, we talk a little bit about the classification of minerals. So like everything in geology, we want to group things. We want to put them in little buckets. And so there are some main mineral groups here that are introduced to you in the main lecture. And what I'd like you to do is just choose a mineral from this group. And so what's the name of it? And then what's the composition? Composition, I mean, what's the chemical formula for it? And then here's some of the properties that you were introduced to in the main lecture there. And so I'd like you to kind of fill this chart out. Now you can choose any mineral that fits into that group. And how will you do that? Well, in the additional resources page, and let's see if I can jump to that for you. So if we go here, there's always a chapter that references what we're talking about if you want to learn more. But here are some helpful places to go to look for minerals. And so mineral information. And I would argue that this one's probably the best. So this has some really good imagery, so you can see the pictures of them. And of course, if you're interested in just the Arizona, you're a rock hound or a mineral hound, you can just get some information here. But for the homework, this is the place to be, because you can search by mineral group and it'll give you some examples, and then it'll have that information there. So you can kind of cruise through that information, and this should help you with the homework. And of course, if you just want to, Google search everything for the homework, I suspect that would work too. So that's what you're doing this week. And of course, we finally kind of synced up our labs. And so our lab this week is going to be on minerals, which I think is useful because, once again, it's nice to have this redundancy, kind of this, oh yeah, I've heard that before. That makes sense. I get it. So that's what we'll do in the lab this week. So that's what we got going on this week for Module 4. If you have any questions or concerns about the content or any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I will help you out.